the Constitution says elections, once the assembly is dissolved, have to be held either in 60 days or within 90 days, depending on how the process of dissolution of the assemblies work. So let's assume it's the maximum 90 days. Anything beyond that, frankly, is unconstitutional. So we should have no doubts about the fact that such a move would be blatantly wrong. It would have to use what I refer to as creative constitutionalism. And creative constitutionalism, our history in Pakistan is evidence that leads to unintended and intended negative consequences that Pakistan continues to suffer from to this day. So deciding to go ahead in that direction and repeating history again would be terrible. When it comes to the ability to execute the agreements with the IMF or others, again, I don't see any reason, in my view, why the law had to be changed to empower the caretakers any more than they already are in terms of day-to-day running of the government. Because much of the agreements in the IMF that has been made public, much of the actions have already been taken place. And if there are other things like maintaining a certain ability to collect taxes, or running a fiscal deficit a certain way, or ensuring that resources are not dispersed at an accelerated pace, all of that is part of the day-to-day running of the government, in my opinion, in any case. So I think, and finally, if the desire is to empower the caretaker government because we don't have that much time, well, then somebody should ask the PDM government, in particular Finance Minister Ishaq Dar, well, why did he waste the last 9 months to get to the IMF agreement that was on the table last year in any case, right? So all of a sudden, this urgency to empower caretakers and so that they can continue making tough choices, I find the logic a bit hollow. I think the risks are huge, and I think there is a recognition among all stakeholders, including military stakeholders, that the risks are significant. It would once again heighten the default risk for Pakistan. And so it's important that a caretaker government and the government that comes in power after elections, again, I'm assuming elections will be held within the constitutional timeline that is there in the law of the land. And so assuming a new government comes in the fall of this year, they have to continue this as well. If I remember the IMF timeline correctly, the next review is towards the end of this year, and then there's a third review in March of 2024. So there are 2 more tranches that are supposed to come. And the staff level agreement is very clear in the sense that Pakistan is going to need another 3-year or 4-year EFF facility that needs to be negotiated with the IMF as well. So maintaining the current program, completing it successfully, while in parallel negotiating a new IMF program is going to be the mandate for a new elected government in Pakistan. And if they go off ramp or sort of off track on this agreement, then not only will default risk significantly escalate, but this idea that there are investments coming from the GCC, UAE and Saudi Arabia in particular, I think those investments will also likely not materialize. I think they most certainly can, and they most certainly should. And the reason why I say that is, look, whether we like it or not, whether we like the state of democracy in Pakistan or not, fact of the matter is that the people of Pakistan have time and again rejected and vociferously rejected unconstitutional acts when given the chance to do so. So if we look at how and why reforms happen around the world, and also look at the context of Pakistan's political economy, it's quite clear that governments that have a mandate don't have to be strong. They just have to have a mandate. When they go about honestly doing their jobs and explaining to the people why certain reforms are needed, do get that buy-in, and those reforms actually are far stickier. According to research conducted by Dr. Irfan Nuruddin, a former colleague of mine, those reforms are far more stickier than reforms conducted by strong, quote-unquote, governments, because weaker governments tend to be more engaging and inclusive in that process. Hence, everybody feels that they have a stake in the reforms journey ahead as well. So I think it's very important that whoever comes to power engages across the aisle, engages across institutions, and engages the public to explain why certain things need to be done. If these measures are taken in a way that, for example, we saw in the 90s with the Moin Qureshi government, a caretaker setup that pushed reforms, well, those reforms, quote unquote reforms, were very quickly reversed because political stakeholders and the public did not feel that they had a buy-in in that process. So again, let's not repeat the past mistakes. Let's understand that 30 to 35 years of no reforms will require 5 to 10 years of consistent reforms. And the only way that the reform journey can be sustained and made consistent is through a political process and a political engagement across the aisle. If any party or any institution in Pakistan feels that they can railroad this entire process ahead just through the strength of their will, I think they will very quickly find that they won't have the buy-in from the public on the journey ahead.